Ladies and gentlemen, it's 7 p.m. in Dubai, 3 p.m. in Lisbon, 11 a.m. in St. Kitts. Welcome to a new episode of the Mobility Standard, the podcast where we dissect current events, trends, and crucial questions related to investment migration. I'm your host, Christian Nesem, editor of IMI, and in this episode I had the pleasure of hosting Mimoun Assraoui and Eric Major of the Latitude Group. We spoke about why Mimoun is replacing Eric as CEO of the Latitude Group and what Eric will be spending his time on going forward. We talked a bit about Latitude's quest for quote-unquote world domination and its progress toward its stated goal of becoming the world's largest investment migration firm. We covered which markets the company is expanding into next. We talked about the role Latitude hopes to play in bringing the industry together to face common challenges and why the Investment Migration Council is viewed by many as, in Eric's words, a private members club, and how he plans to help change that. What is happening on the government advisory front? How is Latitude working to get new programs open? And what went wrong with the Dominica CIP for it to lose visa-free travel to the UK? And why did St. Kitts and Nevis unilaterally raise their prices? All of that and a great deal more in today's episode of the Mobility Standard. Before we start, I'd like to tell you that if you haven't already signed up for our Pro membership, you really should consider it, simply because it'll help you make more money as an investment migration professional. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't remind you that our upcoming IMI Connect Saigon event is just over a month away. We don't have that many tickets left. Ticket sales are open to the public, have been for about a week, and if you want to learn more, just Google IMI Connect Saigon. With the preambles out of the way, let's get this show on the road. All right, we have Mimoun Assraoui. Am I pronouncing that correctly? My Arabic is a bit rusty.
Exactly. Mimoun Assraoui. Perfect, Christian.
Mimoun Assraoui. Yeah, and of course, Eric Major. Now, few days ago, I received a press release from Eric, a bit in advance, telling me that Eric is stepping aside as CEO of Latitude and he's going to become executive chairman. And Mimoun, who has been the CEO of RIF Trust, part of the Latitude Group, is now going to be CEO at the group level. It's been 5 years since you first merged, and during that time you've been a single group, but you've maintained two distinct brands because there was brand value to both of those, RIF Trust and Latitude. I don't know to what extent you've maintained different organizations. You'll tell me that, but I want to ask, now that Mimoun is moving from being CEO of RIF Trust to becoming CEO at the group level, does that mean you'll find a new CEO for RIF Trust, or will the group just have a single CEO? I guess what I'm asking is, will the two firms now integrate completely?
You're right, Christian. I mean, obviously, CEO of RIF Trust, because I founded the RIF Trust 10 years ago. And when we merged, obviously, what does it mean being CEO of RIF Trust? Is being CEO of the Dubai office, where we're covering Middle East and Africa. But obviously, I also have responsibility at the group level, being the vice chairman of the group. And you rightly said we kept two brand names because of the market. Obviously, the brand RIF Trust was well known in Middle East and Africa. This is the reason why at the group level we took that decision of keeping two brand, one group. If you remember, and we had the discussions, that example for Eric in the past, when, for example, HSBC acquired CCF in France. They kept the brand name CCF because it was well recognized. So this was the reason behind keeping the two brand name. But what does it mean right now in terms of, and I will let Eric discuss about his new position as executive chairman, but it's very much to consolidate at the group level, and there will not be a CEO of RIF Trust. This is as a group CEO to further bring the two organizations together there's no need of having a CEO of RIF Trust Investment because it's the same, it's two brands and the same group. So this is, a partial response to your question, and I will let also Eric develop on his side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me just ask Eric directly. You're now going to be executive chairman. And according to your press release, you're going to be focusing on, quote, strategic direction and future growth initiatives with, quote, intensified focus on government advisory and M&A. Now, I want to know, what does that mean in practice? For example, when you refer to M&A, does that mean that you're looking for Latitude to be acquired, or for Latitude to do the acquiring of other businesses? And if you are looking to be acquired, I don't imagine there are many firms within the IM industry who could afford to acquire you. So does that mean you're looking to be acquired by some outside company outside the sector?
Well, Christian, I think it's a little bit of all the above, depending on what presents itself before us. Suffice it to say, over the last 5 years, we were fortunate enough to have been engaged in a number of interesting conversations and discussions, different types of arrangement where we could have been or would have been acquired, as well as being funded by private equity to acquire and build. So the buy and build approach, both of that remains on the table in our future discussions. As often one experiences when entering into this expansion mindset, you're going to meet a lot of people, talk to a lot of groups and backers, and you need the right constellations. A little bit like dating, takes
Yeah.
quite a lot more before you consummate a more serious relationship. So we're firmly down that path. I want to concentrate fully on that because I really do believe that what we're doing already now, and with Mimoun taking the helm to take us into even greater heights on the RCBI side, we need to bring on other elements to this. Either we'll build it, or we'll be acquired, or we'll continue to acquire the people side of the business. The main asset of our organization in our business is people. And we've been very fortunate, as the numbers would show, in our tremendous growth over 5 years, as to the magnet of talent we've been able to attract over to Latitude and RIF from industry peers and the wider industry of financial services. So it will be a combination of aggregating and bringing on additional talent, discussing possibly with PE to acquire businesses or to build it, and as well as potential buyers. So all of the above, and we're already engaged in some interesting discussions in that regard.
You say that people are your biggest asset, right? And of course, the accountant in me says, no, no, no. Salaries definitely go in the liabilities column. But I understand what you mean. You say that the human capital, the skills, that's the foundation of a business like Latitude, or a business like anybody in the investment migration market, right? It's the expertise, the knowledge, that's what gives a company value. Now, you also said that over the years you've been a magnet, you say, for this talent in Latitude Group. Um, if it's the case that most businesses in investment migration derive their corporate value from the people who work there, and you are sort of attracting them magnetically, that talent to your company anyway, why then is there a need to acquire any other companies? I mean, it's not like any of the companies in the business are particularly asset heavy. It's very much asset light, and so you can vacuum up the best talent without acquiring the
Well,
company.
and we've done that, but the good example is the one that we experienced when bringing RIF together with Latitude, which is the footprint that they had in a very important market of the Middle East would have taken me and my colleagues at Latitude years to build, right?
Right.
Years to build organically. So it was a perfect fit first at the people level. And trust me, I'll say it again, as Mimoun and David know, we've been very lucky. It was a marriage of 1+1 = 3. And we know that doesn't always happen in mergers, but we've been very fortunate. So for the logic back then, it was a geography play that gave us an immediate impetus in a very important market. I could see that potentially happening in other markets in which we're lacking a footprint. Let's face it, anyone who looks at our website will see a great international presence, but we're lacking in Asia, we're lacking in South America. And so, that's where, to answer your question, there could be, a merger, so to speak, of firms. But otherwise, we'll do it the other way, which is what we've also been doing, which is at the people level and cherry picking talent to join our forces.
Right. So you're saying to the extent that you see complementarity, geographically speaking, you don't have a lot of coverage in Asia, as you say, Latin America, Africa, not that much. I know you're quite big in Nigeria.
Yes, Middle East and Africa is very, very strong market for us. We've been one of the leader, and we will continue to develop that market. I was just in Egypt last week. Eric was in Turkey. We have an office we have expansion plans in North Africa, in French-speaking Africa. We have great talent to speak the local languages. We want to expand that in Nigeria. We have a team currently in Kenya. We're in South Africa. We have our group COO currently in Latam, in Bolivia. The US is a big market. We have a presence in Asia. So in addition to strengthening our I would say our leadership in certain markets, we really want to look at new market. Americas being one of them. Asia is another big market for us.
So I really want to ask you more about the new markets that you want to expand into, but let me just dwell a little bit on the M&A topic, because as far as I can remember, in let's say the last 7-8 years, the only major merger in investment migration has been the Latitude RIF merger. And typically, when you have a merger in business, the idea is that you will have some kind of synergy. The result will be more than the sum of the parts. And Eric, you mentioned that this was one of those cases where 1+1 has equaled 3. But if it's worked out well for you to expand geographically in that mechanical acquisition-based manner, why do you think you're the only one so far? Why haven't other firms done the same?
Listen, not everyone out there necessarily looks at this business on a global scale. There's a lot of boutique operations, individual networks, and not everyone necessarily sees the view of the world that Mimoun and I have, in particular, coming from larger institutions. We're both guys who came from the corporate world that look at things on a very international basis. And we see that this is a business that the winners will be those that are global, and that have a global footprint, global proposition, global resources around the world. And it's a certain mindset and a certain skill set to deliver on that. Not everyone necessarily has that cloth. And frankly, it comes with a different set of challenges and headaches. Sometimes I ask myself, why have I gone down this route when I look at some of my peers who seem to have much simpler lives and still do very well financially with their 1 or 2 or 5 men and women shops. So I at times get jealous of that. But I know that the ones that will survive and prevail in 10, 20, 30 years are the ones who've gone global, whether it's in banking, whether it's in tax, whether it's in all types of consultancy, businesses, accounting. This is no different. The only thing I'd like to bring to it is ancillary services around. And let's face it, the beauty of our business is that we're just this client acquisition machine.
Yeah.
Every year in growing numbers and growing percentages, people coming through our door, and we're facilitating them acquiring residency or citizenship. But there's a missed trick, other than the fact that they may have friends and brothers and sisters that they could refer to us, which is great. There's a lack of ancillary services that our industry is missing up on. This is something that we're working, and I want to focus on. So you asked me, what am I going to be doing? Handing over the keys to Mimoun is really to pull myself out of the daily operations, which is what a CEO also gets involved in. And I'm at 55 now, and I want to start thinking more of the strategic side and building the people side, bringing in opportunities like M&A, Government advisory, you said it earlier. Maybe you'll ask more questions about it.
I will. I will.
There was a lot of talk about that for many, many months, and nothing really has happened. You're right, and there's a bit to be said about that. But that's where I want to focus. Get closer to the IMC and help raise the industry. I think it needs a lot more help. So yeah, this is where I want to focus.
You said, Eric, that the guys who go global are the ones who win. Why is that, you think? Is it because people now need a comprehensive global answer to everything? But then you're not the only firm trying to do this, right? How do you gather under one roof people who can answer every question about any jurisdiction?
Well, it's maybe a bit of complexity and challenge without a doubt, but that's the beauty of the business of trying to build that solution. Listen, you got to be real about what it is you're going to be good at, and you got to define that, be very definite of what the service proposition. Up until now, and only recently are we expanding beyond the pure residency and citizenship by investment. I've done 30 years where I'd start all discussion. I'm not here to help with student visas and work permits and temporary intra-company transfer. I don't do that. We do by investment. But wait, we are expanding that to anyone who's high net worth who could also be looking at this by descent, also looking at this through independent means visas, right? Because the key is they're independent, they're wealthy. So we're sticking to our knitting with respect to the audience, the target, the people, and their profile. But the visa and citizenship options could be slightly different. So that's where we're enlarging ourselves. But we're very focused on that.
You mentioned that it's a client acquisition machine, right? So people come in through the door for investment migration. And then it's up to you what ancillary services you want to offer. Now, how do you limit yourself? Because I know some companies say we do not give tax advice, for example. That's a different animal. That's something you need different licenses for. It exposes you to a whole other set of regulations. We don't want to touch tax, but we may recommend some international schools. We may obviously offer real estate advisory, etc. What are the ancillary services that you guys are doing now, and to what extent do you plan to expand that suite of ancillary services?
That's a very good question, and definitely, as we say, the majority of our business is obviously residency and citizenship, and diversifying into citizenship by descent and other, I would say, how you call that, nomad visas and other proposition. Now, in terms of this is what I was mentioning earlier in terms of our clients, and as I always say, our clients are part of our family. We're in the inner circle of the client. We are like doctors and lawyers. We have a lot of information about our client. They trusted us in this information, the assets of the clients, and all kind of information, bank statement, and all of that. So we are in a very privileged situation in front of this client, and we want to be able to offer the client, as you correctly said, education, concierge services. But there are other elements that we are looking at. We cannot develop on the plan that we have, because this is something that is ongoing within our organization as we are changing, I would say, the management objectives. This is something that we're talking with our employees, our clients. What are the services that we can do internally? Where, for example, I'm just mentioning a service. Do we have a tax advisors within the organization that will be able to talk to the client to do the hard work first, and then refer it to another tax company whom we have relationship? Our clients have real estate. Is it something that we want to push? I mean, it's clearly in the thinking, and this is part of the diversification process.
Mimoun's right. It's something right now that we have that privileged relationship. We have this access to a client who has these ancillary needs. Yes, up until now, in many instances, we would outsource the education consultancy or the tax side. Not everything of that nature you would necessarily want to, in my mind, embed or integrate in a Latitude Group, simply because it's hard to have that layer of expertise, that depth of expertise for Canada, for the US, for the UK, for Australia, for Spain.
Yeah.
So it
So
certain
where do
things.
you draw the line? Where do you draw the
I would
line?
draw the line on the things that are more akin to what we could deliver globally, more akin to the core of our business. You know, some choose education as a core component. Some will choose real estate as a core component. Some will choose asset management and investments as a key component that you could add on. Some would add corporate services and fiduciary services. So, without spilling the beans, because we have a strategy which we're going to be implementing in the months and years ahead, it's going to be one or many of these. The question is it bought? Is it acquired? Is it built?
Right.
Which of these three options will it be? That's the part I need to focus on as my role going forward.
Mimoun, you mentioned several of the markets that you operate in and where you have a big footprint, and Eric was talking about some of the ones where you don't. I want to understand, what are the most interesting markets for you right now for your clients? So it's really two questions. One is, what are your biggest markets right now, and the second question is, where do you anticipate the biggest growth? Which markets will grow the fastest over the next few years?
As you rightly said, Middle East, I mean, Dubai has been like London and like Hong Kong, like Canada in the time, has been the hub for this industry. I mean, I've started, 10 years ago, and it was I would say a hub for this industry, because you have 200 nationalities being here, being wealthy entrepreneurs making money, but there's no citizenship scheme, for the people that have been living here. I've been living in the UAE for the last 20 years, and only recently, for example, they imposed on they put in place the golden visa to be able to give a sense of belonging to this expat that have been living here. But these people, tomorrow you are Syrian, yes, you are wealthy, but you have only a Syrian passport. You need to travel to Berlin, for example, or to Paris. It's a headache to get your passport. So they're buying their own comfort. So Dubai has been a natural market for our industry, and that's why you have, I would say right now, is the most competitive place with the most players in the world, So Dubai, and we've been able to be one of the strong player in Dubai. After, what we've done is growth into other markets. And for us, we are only touching the top of the iceberg, as we say in Africa. Yes, we have an office in Nigeria, we have an office in South Africa, we have an office in Egypt. We're looking at strategic at opening Morocco soon, and we will be continue to expand into Africa, because Nairobi is a great hub for all of the wealthy individuals that are in Africa. So we want to have a place there. Obviously, the French speaking, because we are lucky to have, Eric being Canadian and French speaker, myself, and we have other people within the management that are French speakers. So French speaking in Africa would be a growth market. So this is the plan for Africa. Beyond that, the growth, and you said it correctly, we've seen amazing growth coming from the US market. We've established there, we're growing that franchise. Just right now, we have management also being on the East Coast, looking at other opportunities. And I think, and we've seen that trend. We have a managing partner in Vancouver, in Montreal, and in Cayman. The US is definitely a target market. And also, in addition, Latin America. We are currently in roadshow in LATAM. Latin America, yes. And finally, I would say, maybe just to sum up, so consolidating, improving Africa, the America market, North America and Latin America. And for 2024, Asia will be a focus. We have an office in Hong Kong. We have a presence in Vietnam. We really want to push that. Last month, we opened our office in Lahore. We have also other countries in Southeast Asia that are very interesting. India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and we want to capitalize on that.
Just commenting briefly on the different markets that you've mentioned, Latin America is not a very big market for investment migration. 650 million people live in South America. That's about the same as the number of people who live in Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is a much bigger market for investment migration. And I think there are two reasons for that. Number one, the passports are not bad in South America already. They already have, most of them have visa-free Schengen, right? That's number one. Number two, there's a big overlap in Latin America between the people who have wealth and the people who have European ancestry. And so a lot of the high net worth individuals in South America are able to get citizenship through descent a lot of the time, right? But of course, there's still 3 times more high net worth individuals in South America than there are in Southeast Asia. So there should still be something of a market. It's just a comment on me for why, I see that everybody's in Asia, everybody's in Europe, everybody's in the Middle East, but very few of the leading international investment migration firms have a physical presence in South America.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's a good point. I mean, that's why we, for us, Latin America is very specific, and you mentioned it is a strong passport. But a lot of the government in these countries are becoming leftist. You see it in Venezuela, you see it in other countries, in Peru, in Bolivia. So for these people, it's not about getting a better passport, but it's being able to send their kids to where in Europe. And Spain is a natural destination for these people. So we are lucky to have our group CEO who is Spanish, who has a strong connection also into Latin America, who is developing this offering. So for us, it's as you say, and and we are giving, and I hope we're not giving too much recipe. I know it's a podcast listened by our peers, but obviously that has been this is a reason why on our side we want to focus on that. But so this is
it's a targeted approach. The South American market, it's very specific and niche. That part of the world, typically, I used to say is very U.S. centric. If they're going to move anywhere, it's likely to be the Americas or the United States in particular. But as Mimoun points out, we've seen an opportunity in some specific markets in countries where, from a family planning point of view, Europe could make sense. So it's more targeted than what we would see in Southeast Asia. But I take your point. It's a market I've attempted even back in my HSBC days, going back 15 years ago, with all the investment we made, despite all our best efforts, very little output. But there's a way of cracking it, and there's a lot to be said about, John Green and Chris Willis from our team would roam the streets of LA and New York talking about alternative citizenship 15 years ago, and every American would look at them saying, why the hell would I need that? Why are you bothering me with this? So there's a lot to be said about persistence, getting the name in there, getting the knowledge out there, and then at some point something happens, and all of a sudden they see the value, as we're seeing in the United States right now.
Eric, you said in the press release, and you've said before, that you have very ambitious growth plans for Latitude Group.
World domination plans, yes.
Yeah, global domination plans. You've said publicly, in fact, before in IMI, that one of your goals is to become the world's biggest investment migration firm. So my question is twofold. Are you on track for that? And what is the path that you're taking to get there? And just before you answer, how do we even define the biggest, right? I mean, there are a couple of different proxy measures we could look at. So one thing the best would be to know revenue. Nobody wants to tell me their revenue. And then the other thing I look at is, headcount, office footprint, and sometimes people will tell me the number of clients. Now, I know Henry Fan does 8,000 clients a year.
We're not quite there yet.
Not quite there yet. So, tell me about your progress toward world domination.
8,000 clients. How? I mean, by which because it can be, if it's skilled migration, and we have to define that. I mean, and I think the comparable, and I will let Eric continue on that, is the number of CBI clients. I think 8,000 in a year. It's
no, not CBI. That's all. That's all programs. And he says, his philosophy is, look, we're just opening doors to the outside world from China, they're global now. They're opening various doors around the world, and some of them are investment based, but they're not all investment based.
Yeah. No, and we know Henry and Mr. Sun, they've built a wonderful business and franchise, a growing internationally, as you point out, and not in easy conditions
No.
with all that's gone on in China, most certainly as of late. So I know it's a very challenging environment, but they've done marvels. But Mimoun's right. I think one would have to dissect that figure a little bit. I think are we on the right path, on the path to being the largest? I would say so. I mean, since the pandemic, without spilling too many beans, I think we grew 4 times in 3 years. The actual number of clients, again, thanks to people talent, thanks to the merger, thanks to the pandemic, thanks to the Americas. So all of this is feeding very well. That's where the whole brand and the globalness plays towards the winner in this is the one who's going to be global, because in the end, with the consumers being more, less, having less time and attention span, they will gravitate to a brand that's known in the market. And so long as we have the talent behind it to lead those conversations forward, we will win. And I think that's really boils down to describing our strategy.
There are few organizations in this industry that have the international geographical presence. And we really want to, and we have obviously, playing a role in this industry through you, the IMI, for the IMC. We are representative of the IMC in Middle East. We are representative in the IMC in the Caribbean. So we really, really want to also, why we want to do that is also want to protect the interests of the industry. And also this is going to be one of Eric's role is obviously do part of lobbying and discussion. I'm sure you can come back to that, at the European Commission levels and all of that. So we really have generally the interests of our industry at heart, because obviously 130, where every month. I mean, we're feeding 160 mouths every month, so it's important for us to make sure that we're protecting the interests of the industry. Obviously, that we're growing is important.
Yeah. So, okay, Mimoun, if we're talking about protecting the industry, I mean, there have been many efforts, lobby efforts, engagement efforts. The IMC has, of course, spearheaded this effort with mixed success, I would say, because they've been operating for what, 8 years, and industry relations with the powers that be has never been worse, right? So, what needs to change in the approach, at whether it's at the IMC level or if it's a few big firms coming together or individual big firms taking up the mantle? What needs to change in the approach to government to improve relations between industry and government, and B, to protect protect or potentially reverse some of the negative steps and the animosity that we've seen, especially from the European Union?
Well, my view, first of all, on the IMC itself, you're right. I mean, they've done wonderful things, and they've driven wonderful output in terms of their publications and some awareness of the industry, but there has been some failings in terms of achieving what the industry goals would be, which is a better understanding and support of the industry at the European level, for sure.
I mean, let's give credit to IMC where credit is due. They've really tried. They've really engaged. They've written letters. They've showed up to meetings in Brussels, but Brussels is not listening. And also, what I see is there's a reluctance among a lot of the industry firms to support that work.
Well, and that's the bit I want to focus on, and trying to be more inclusive. The IMC is still viewed by many as still a private members club, a membership of only a few select players, and that's got to change. I really do think that the industry is much broader than what the IMC currently shows and represents in terms of its membership. So how do you crack that nut is actually structural at the board level. And so there's some things that need to be done. But certainly it needs to be more inclusive. It has to have a much wider membership. and it's got to seek the participation and effort and resources of those members to achieve what Bruno and his team can only achieve so much with the limited resources. But to your point, he's achieved a lot. And also, the whole academic side of this equation of our industry is very key. They've really developed a really interesting framework, a positive framework in terms of getting accreditations for people in the industry. I think that's a very important step. But on the lobbying side, there's just so much a small team like that could achieve. I and hopefully a few other industry players could play a role in expanding that.
Well, you say okay, so it's a bit of a chicken and egg question, right? Because on the one hand, to be effective, they need more resources, but to get more resources, maybe they have to be more effective, right? Maybe they have to get the results so that companies say, okay, if we contribute more money to the IMC can lobby on our behalf.
Yeah, yes, but I think the bigger issue is that it's still perceived as being a private club of a select few, and when we know the industry is so much broader than what's represented at these
So what's stopping that from broadening? Is it that, I mean, maybe in the early days, some players were excluded, and then maybe the solution is to bring those back in the fold,
Yeah,
or
it's perception. I think there's some reticence about how it all started,
uh,
and I can tell you I was there, so I know exactly how it all started. But it's already a lot more diverse and broader than how it started, and that's shown with the last IMC forum in London. Hopefully, the one in Dubai in a couple of months or in the new year will be even broader. But it's still missing some key players, which we don't have to mention, don't have to name because they know who they are, that need to be part of this and bring in their weight and experience and support to achieve the industry goals. And to be honest, the best example I have around this topic is the early days of the both federal and Quebec IIP, where we'd be around a table with the feds in front of us. We'd have 12 of our biggest competitors. But guess what? On that day, we're best friends just trying to achieve the one thing, which is better policy and better management and administration of an important program that was feeding our businesses. And there was a lot of coalescence, a lot of common effort in Canada in those days. And we don't have that yet internationally, and we ought to. And there's some really important players missing in that effort.
how do you think someone like, for example, us here at IMI, how can we help to broaden the participation in the Investment Migration Council? How can you help? What are some strategies?
I think the key is, to me, and I'll be very open and public. I shared this with a few members already, is that the board itself has to be one that has renewals and that have terms. So board members need to have a specific term under which, after their 4 or 5 year term, need to be replaced.
And what is it now? What is it now?
It has,
Lifetime tenure, or
yeah, it looks like it.
okay?
And that's a big problem because then it's always the same people leading the organization, despite the membership growing, but it's still missing some key players,
Right.
and key players that not just members, but actually want to bring change and assist in getting the industry message across. And that's at the board level. So that needs to change, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. I think I just want to add, I mean, that's a very good point. And obviously, as you mentioned earlier, better than anyone, the genesis of, the Investment Migration Councils compared to the other one that was competition, GIC. So there's always been rivalry in our industry. So we've always been a mediator, being neutral and trying to bring the people together. So remember organizing event in Dubai between Bruno and Arton to find out some solution, as you know, and it went up to legal battles in the past, remember. At least we don't have that animosity anymore. There's a consensus that our industry is changing and we need to come together and really our role, and it's going to be more specifically for Eric. I mean, we are lucky to have him as our executive chairman, a pioneer and veteran in this industry. He has a broad consensus of this industry. And I think it has a great role there to play to bring
But Eric
hopefully a
didn't want to mention
consensus.
names, but now that you've done it anyway, Mimoun, do you think that overtures towards some of the firms you mentioned that have, let's say, had some conflicts in the past with the IMC, perhaps because of the origins and the origins of the IMC and the board composition of the IMC, do you think overtures toward those those firms on the outside of the IMC right now would be a big step toward more inclusion?
Yeah, no, for sure it would be, but I've already had those discussions, and I know what it is that they'd be wanting to see beyond just being invited and coalesce into joining as members. They're right in saying that there needs to be a better representation of the industry, and one like our industry has a lot of newcomers and is expanding internationally, and therefore that needs to be represented at the board level and bringing that impetus towards advancing the industry in the way it's growing itself. So the short answer is, I think that they can be persuaded if they see those changes at the board level.
But what's stopping those changes at the board level from taking place? Are the incumbents reluctant?
No, the real answer is no one's had time to really focus on it.
Okay, all right. Okay, let's
So,
talk a little bit about government advisory. There hasn't been much happening in the last few years on the government advisory front. There were some stunted attempts in the Balkans. There were several. Albania came close to opening, only to be basically leaned on by the European Union. Albania has said we will await the outcome of the trial between Malta and the European Commission, and if that comes out in Malta's favor, they say they will open a CIP. At least that's what the current Edi Rama administration is saying. In North Macedonia, there was much fanfare, but not too much substance in the end. I believe we're still awaiting the first formal approvals. Montenegro was good for a few years, but then again, the EU weighed in and they found that they'd rather keep good relations with the EU, to which they're trying to accede, than keep their CIP going. Of course, Moldova was a bit of a false start. I mean, it was operational for a number of months, but ultimately, they had 3 or 4 governments in the space of 18 months, and ultimately it was scrapped. And so now I see Kosovo is going to get Schengen visa-free access starting next year. Eric, do you know something that we don't know on the government advisory front?
so I would say to you that your account is accurate in terms of the evolution over the last few months. I would say it this way. I mean, we have a government advisory team comprised of Mimoun, myself, Chris Willis, and Ken Ing. And since the pandemic, since 2020, we've made over 11 submissions. Half of that on request, the other half on us taking the initiative. We've had a lot of really interesting conversations that was progressing well, and then an election occurred, or conversations that was progressing well, and the European Union weighed in, or progressions that progressed well, and then governments being governments, they stall in getting back to, but it's still progressing. So it's admittedly, this has been a disappointment, and this is where part of it I estimate as simply because if I take ownership of this, is I just personally was too busy with other operational issues. So I think a lot of this stuff, if you leave it just to government to push forward, is going to go nowhere.
Right.
You really have to have the idea, the proposals, and the FaceTime and advancing it, because
You
already
you have to be on the ball 100% of the time, huh?
exactly. And in fairness, in my previous roles, I saw that at play, where it does take that dedication of constantly pushing it forward. Otherwise, it often has a tendency to die a slow death within just the realm of government. So this is one of the reasons why I want to dedicate my time and effort on this, because I know the interest is there. Post pandemic, the finances of the world are in shambles. They need these kind of um, proposals and economic development projects to get their FDIs going again. And I know that we'll get a better outcome if in my case, I tend fully to it. So it's a watch this space, but I know the interest is there. There are new markets that are looking into it. We've already seen this migrate from west to east,
Yeah.
right? Egypt has a program. Oman is flirting with the idea. The UAE came up with their, Jordan came up with their program in the last 3 years. So there's a lot of newcomers in new spaces. They're more regional plays, but they're important nonetheless. They're big. There could be big markets in there. But there's also some new untapped jurisdictions that we want to explore. So, but make no mistake about it. I'll say this about GOVAD: you could put all the. It's a little bit like M&A. You got to dance a lot before you find that fit. The political constellations for this stuff is still very difficult. Certainly on a citizenship side, citizenship, you need the magic ingredients of majority governments, um, center right thinking, open mindedness, and then the rest is they just see the results, or at least the proposals of our figures and how significant they could be. But it's not easy to have all those ingredients. I'll give an example which a lot of people in the industry would know. Croatia, for decades, was courting this idea. But you got coalition governments where you got at the table the communists sitting next to the far right guy with the tree hugger green guy in the middle. And how do you get something like this over the line? It never got over the line in Croatia because the political constellations, weren't there or ready for it. So it's not an easy ask, for sure.
Well, what's your approach when you do outbound push for, like an outbound push? You contact the government, right? You
Yeah.
contact the government, say, hey, we think you should have a CIP. Do you? Is it Latitude alone, or do you try to bring in a
Question.
consortium?
Yeah, it's a good question. We're certainly, and we've done a consortium, as you know. We've made a number of those 11 submissions. Some of them, not all of them, were consortium based. Governments like the idea of industry coming together to deliver for them a proposition, an offering, as opposed to just one firm trying to do it. So we've learned from that. I've learned from that over the years. So you get better results in joining forces. So consortiums are important, and as long as each consortium member brings important elements and ingredients to the offering. Listen, what do I look for? I look for, again, is this a government that's got at least 4 or 5 years ahead of them? Are they, generally pro-economic development and business? Are they what I would call what I call the passport grade B
Mm.
and above, B minus, B plus, A minus, A plus?
B being Caribbean citizenship?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, because that's where you have a lot more interest and scale.
No.
And there's a lot of countries that are still very much in that B, some even in that A minus, that could be interested and are interested in this. So that's what I look at. And then once we get a feel, is it best to bring it as a consortium? Generally, it does.
Mimoun, I want to talk to you a little bit about some recent industry developments and get your take on those. We recently saw that the UK revoked visa-free access from a number of countries, including Dominica and Vanuatu, allegedly over their CBI programs. the US brought the Caribbean together around 6 CBI principles. Later, we saw some articles online that claimed the EU had issued 6 demands of CBI countries, but we don't actually have any proof that they did. And St. Kitts and Nevis CIP, a couple of days later, massively reformed their entire program precisely in accord with those alleged 6 demands. So it's a very quick reaction, suspiciously quick. I mean, to me, it indicated the EU actually didn't issue those 6 demands. We've never heard the EU say that directly, but that instead somebody in St. Kitts probably made this up to justify the changes to the St. Kitts CIP, which were on their way anyway. But I want to understand what you guys are expecting next from the EU and the OECD countries, maybe US, UK, in regards to their treatment of CBI countries. What do you think, Mimoun?
Yes, Christian, you're right. I mean, we've seen a lot of development since March in our industries in terms of where our industry is going. Regarding Dominica and having the suspension of the UK visa waiver, I think that was, and I'm sure Dominica realized that was a mistake from the CIU. I mean, we can talk about it post-mortem. Accepting some of the applicant with a UK visa rejection was not smart move. So they shoot themselves in the feet, and that was that was not smart move. It's the same for Vanuatu. Unfortunately, they onboarded some applicants that should not have been allowed to have a Vanuatu citizenship. So due diligence is very important. And these countries, the UK and the European Union, they are taking that into consideration. Following that, a lot of developments happened since then. Obviously, the EU putting a lot of pressure on these countries. And as you rightly said, nobody knows. I mean, there's been a lot of speculations and a lot of knee jerks. And we know that even if St. Kitts have taken these decisions in July, now there's some question marks why we've taken these decisions, because it seems like the other countries will not follow through. I mean, St. Lucia, when you talk to the head of CIUs, mentioning there's no indication of price increase. Yes, they implemented like the interview, like they're doing in, for example, in St. Kitts and in Antigua, where you have to spend 5 days. But we don't have
the interviews. But the interviews were part of the 6 principles that they publicly agreed to with the U.S. Treasury, whereas the price increase, they seem to have acted entirely in a vacuum, completely unilaterally. And I think, when I spoke to the other CIU heads immediately after that decision, they were as surprised as me about this price increase.
I'll go further, Christian. I was there just a few weeks ago in August to introduce myself to the government, to the CIU, and applaud the general intention and direction that they're wanting to bring their program. So I do, recognize their rightful intention to raise the bar and take measures to ensure a more sustainable CBI for them in St. Kitts. But when I asked them the $1 million question, did the measures you've taken, have you been given any assurance from the EU that by taking them that visa-free travel to EU or UK will be assured? They said, no, we have no such assurances. So
so that means that this article in the Associated Times appears to have been taken from thin air.
Yes, it would appear so. Surprising that no one in the EU, countered it or commented it, but my assessments from what I've heard, and again, I applaud their intention, is that they want to send a signal. They're prepared, as they said to me, to take 3 steps back before they could take a step forward. They're prepared to see 30% of their GDP fall down to 5 in terms of significance that the CBI will bring. So very honorable and bold decisions by any account, but by no means do they have the assurance that this is going to save them, although they think it sends the right signal that they're maybe more serious than the other guys. So maybe there's a bit of a positioning on that front. But
so it's preemptive, is what you're saying. Mimoun, what have you noticed? I mean, since St. Kitts changed its prices, what have you noticed in the the marketing mix? I mean, when you speak to clients, are they now dismissing sync kits offhand because it's twice the price, or are they still interested in sync kits?
No, definitely. I mean, I think that, and they start realizing that, clients, when you're talking of double the pricing of another country like Saint Lucia, like Antigua and Barbuda, like Grenada, which have the same advantage, clients will look for these alternative solutions. So so it's been a bold move. We think that even though clearly, we haven't seen yet the consequences of this, but this on the long term is good for our industry because there are realization that there's been some in entre guillemets in bracket abuse, and so the head of CIUs, the government, are well aware of that, and they are taking the necessary steps to improve that. This has been a wake up call. Okay, some kids did that. The others, Ireland did not follow up, but has been a wake up call to preserve this program because it's a very important part of their GDP. So, and for us, we see it as a good things on the long term because obviously it will clean the industry. There's been some practices that are not acceptable. As we mentioned earlier, we are safeguarding of this industry, and it's going to be positive on the long term. Yes, some people will suffer in the short term, but if we want to clean our industry, this is one way also of doing it, and talking to the government. And we've been pioneer. I mean, we've always discussed into the different gathering that we have with the head of CIUs regarding some practices, and we're feeding them with information because it's in our interest. We don't have a small shop where we have 10 people working. As I mentioned to you, we have responsibilities toward not only our employees, our clients, and our shareholders.
But one thing we also see, and here I think we should highlight Malta, is that the EU keeps moving the goalposts, right? So initially they say, "Oh, we are concerned about the due diligence process," and then they show them the due diligence process. Oh, okay, this is great, and then okay, but we're still concerned about the vetting because of A, B, and C. And then Malta goes ahead and further strengthens the vetting process, implementing X, Y, Z new measures, and making the due diligence process really unassailable. And then the change in tone comes from the EU, and it becomes, no, it's okay, maybe you check them well, but it's still wrong. No, it's just wrong. Like morally, they have something against it. So it feels as though no matter what the CBI industry does to, as you say, Mimoun, clean up and improve its practices, best practices, and high vetting standards and tough controls, at the end of the day, those arguments are kind of just smoke screens. And the real problem is that the people who run the European Union have an ideological aversion to the the fact that you can sell citizenship. They don't want it to be a commodity. They want citizenship to be something ethereal, something sentimental, something that you can tie to a national bird and a national song, and these things. So how do you counter that?
Well, you counter it by creating programs that compromise on this reality, which you've fully, rightfully described, Christian, which is what Portugal, I guess, we thought was achieving, and we know a few have achieved it, but it remains to be seen whether what Portugal was advertising is going to prevail to the masses. But what I'm saying is, it forces the market towards residency with a clear pathway to citizenship, right? So that's the future of this business in Europe. You're right. I think Malta's program has been under severe scrutiny for the last 10 years. When we launched it in 2013, 2014, it's been in constant battle. And they may well win their day in court, and the legal experts would suggest they will win their day in court. That doesn't mean the program will necessarily be around
But
forever.
then the EU will find extra legal means of applying pressure, right? It's not like Albania, or Montenegro or North Macedonia or Moldova or any of these countries It's not like they, were formally given the order by the EU to close their programs. These are, private conversations in which the EU somehow intimates that, look, this could jeopardize your EU accession or jeopardize access to EU funds, right?
Yeah, well, but being already part of the EU, they'll use other levers to achieve their goal. I mean, it's not just the Americans who have a strong arm of getting what they want. Brussels has their way of getting what they want, and they will. Frankly, I believe they will get what they want, and I think Malta is smart enough to know they probably will at some point in time. So that will shift the business towards this residency with a clear pathway to citizenship. And then we're going to get into the nuance of, is it 7 days a year, 30 days a year? But it'll be a while before you get it. So it's back to this, in Europe, it takes 5 years to naturalize. That's just what it's got to be, and that's what it's going to be. And then the whole details of, were you there, how much you were there, and what other ties and genuine links. You know what? Maybe in 10 years we'll dive into that. But right now, this done in 12, 18 months thing, Caribbean style, we don't like it.
Another element that's kind of shaking up the CBI market, or has the potential to reconfigure the value of citizenship as a travel document, or passport as a travel document, is the electronic travel authorization. The European has been planning their own ETIAS. It's been in the works at least since 2019, if not earlier, and it keeps getting postponed. Most recently, it was postponed until 2025. How is it, Eric, that this ETIAS, you think, will change as I said, change the value of the passport as a travel document versus the value of citizenship as a right to permanently remain in a country?
Yeah, I think that's the difference right there, is that, our clients are looking for citizenship and a passport for a number of different reasons. And in many parts of the world, a big part of that was ease of travel and enhanced mobility. But there's, in reality, also the benefit of just settlement, the right to be and to settle in that particular country. And that will always be there, of course. But I do foresee, um, thanks to ETA, ETIAS, ESTA in the United States, and fast forward 10, maybe 15 years from now, where when you're filling out that form and you're putting your name, your date of birth, and where you live, and what nationalities you have, and where you were born, that the algorithm that happens in the back will certainly look at which passports you declared. Maybe it will certainly look at where you currently live, and your age group, and maybe there'll be questions about what you do. But I think it'll be a much lesser significance and importance than the world we currently live in. So I view it as maybe overly optimistic, but as further democratizing the mobility of humans on planet Earth. Whereas it's not because you're Syrian that you won't be able to go to Italy. It's because maybe you're Syrian with some background issues. In the same way that the Australian guy who wants to go skiing in Switzerland is told, you're not coming to Switzerland.
Right.
It's not because you're Australian that we're going to let you in. It's because we got these other algorithms that we check on you. And we know we're in the world where that is actually achievable already. I mean, our firm, we have 2 international due diligence databases that we use. And within seconds, I have a quick snapshot figure of who this person is and whether there's anything nefarious. And I mean seconds, let's say minutes at most. So the technology is there. I think the acquiring of citizenship merely for the past for the benefit of mobility is still there, but it'll be less significant in 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. Okay. So I get your point about democratization, because if we're looking at individuals rather than just nationalities, I mean, we can have a more nuanced picture of the individual, right? Mm-hmm. And we can take more factors into account. And so people wouldn't be excluded or included on the basis of nationality alone. Wouldn't this change wouldn't this change entirely what a passport is? I mean, because if you take this to its logical extreme, we could all have a passport. Like, just instead of me having a passport from Norway, I could have a passport of Christian Nesheim, and maybe it's stored on a blockchain or something eventually, and
Well, and I'll say what you're describing there is maybe 30 or 40 years away, but I'm not going to discredit your idea. I think they will be around the individual and who that individual is and the risk. Listen, let me say it this way. I'm a banker in my early career. There are the 5 C's of credit: collateral, credit capacity, credit history, character. Forget the fifth one. But out of those 5 C's, where the branch manager would say, I give them the loan or not, 80% was credit history.
Mm.
Like, did you pay the bank on the last loan or the last credit card bill on time?
Right.
So what I'm saying is that citizenship will count. Where you live counts. How old you are maybe also counts. But the 80% of the decision, I'll tell you right now, in 10 years, is what dirt do I have on Eric Major?
Right. Right.
No, definitely. No, definitely. I mean, you made a very valid point. I mean, if you look at it, it's true. Our industry, the passport is a very archaic way compared to how the world is evolving. Everything is digital, so it's still a books where people are traveling. So I agree with you in the future, and we start seeing that, for example, even here in Europe, in the UAE, you don't even need to see immigration officer, for biometric, you just pass by. So this is the first step toward this digitalization of identity. Some might be something in the eyes, iris, all of that. So it's going to grow. And this ESTA, ETIAS, and ETA, this is just the beginning of this implementation. Me, for example, I have a French passport. When I go to the US, I have to apply for ESTA, and this takes less than 24 hours to get the pre-approval. Same now with the UK was going to be implementing. Even if you are a French wanted to travel to the UK, you need to go online and just put your information so that they have this data on you to pre-check. So it's not a discrimination towards, like we could have seen, for example, for Iranian or Syrian or Nigerian, is very much knowing that person. And European Union is doing the same. I mean, we just learned recently there's going to be deadline in 2025. But all of this, and this is what we're telling our clients, is not a discrimination toward you. This is like a global world where we live in, where, well, you need to show patte blanche.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yes, it's coming.
And finally, Christian, that's why a lot of what we do, we're still this client acquisition. And trust me, people will want citizenship to settle somewhere or to have a right to be there, at least residency for sure as well. So this doesn't mean, the dissolution of the industry. If anything, it could further expand it in many ways. But I think the discrimination around I'm born in Pakistan or I'm born in China or I'm born in Venezuela, I think could lighten. Not yet. This is not tomorrow, but in a decade or so. And I think more the reason for us to have these ancillary services, which is also a big part of where we're going with this, because the business is going to change.
Okay, look, I know Mimoun's running out of time, but Eric, at your suggestion, it was a good idea, and someone did it to me once. I've included some fun questions at the end, just some rapid fire.
I wish you would have told us at the beginning. We would have prepared our thoughts.
Oh no, that wouldn't be as fun then. So I'll ask you both the same question. You can answer in turn. If you had unlimited time and money, and you didn't worry about the tax implications, in which 3 locations would you spend most of your year?
That's a great question. This is the Eric Major answer, not necessarily the Eric Major and Annalisa Major answer.
Okay.
I say this because I'm a big fan of Vancouver, where I lived for 16 years, and will always have a dear place in my heart. Second, Geneva, again, mountains, water, French speaking. Thirdly, New York City.
Mimoun?
Yeah, for me, I've been around now, been expat for the last 23 years, between Europe, Asia, Tokyo, and now Dubai for 20 years. Obviously, family lives in Paris and being Moroccan origin, so a bit of time between the two countries. I think Morocco would be great. Switzerland also, given the mountains, it's appealing and it's French speakers and it's close to Paris that I appreciate. And the third country, I mean, would be in the Caribbean. I'm also St. Lucian, so I think spending some time in the Caribbean is would be an ideal scenario. And luckily, I mean, when I said Geneva, is already taking into account the tax implication in France, but this would be like the circle. But obviously, I've been in Dubai for 20 years, and Dubai is a great place, and it's safety. So between Dubai, Morocco, where it can cover Africa, and I would say even the Caribbean.
Those are your three.
Would be my.
All right. Now, each of you name one person in the investment migration industry that you admire and explain why.
One only. Oh, you go first. Of course, Mimoun Assraoui, CEO of Latitude Group.
No, but sorry, present company excluded. Pick someone.
Present company. I mean, and I think I'm saying that I have a lot of respect for Chris Kellin, because obviously he's been one of the pioneer. I know that but I think he launched the path to for our industry, and we need to recognize that, and whatever like the controversies and all of that. But I feel I have respect for the person, for the firm, and this is one of the reasons many of us.
I mean, Mimoun's absolutely right. We have to get credit where credit is due. He was the bold trailblazer in 2004, 2005. I remember those early meetings where he was coming up with this idea. So I have to echo your choice, Chris, is indeed why many of us are here. I would add on the RBI side, unfortunately no longer living, but when it was dear of heart, and it was truly the true pioneer Canadian immigrant investor program, a gentleman by the name of Louis Leblanc, who passed away 18 months ago. That guy in the industry, certainly in the Canadian context, that made it all start and begin.
Great. All right, final question. One piece of advice, what advice would you give to your 20-year-old self if you could send a message back in time? Career advice.
Wow, that's a tough one.
Career. I mean, for me, if I can start, because 20 years ago I was in a completely different industry. I was into banking. I left the banking world 10 years ago to be in this industry. The advice is like, try to be a builder, an entrepreneur, have entrepreneurial skill. And I've discovered that since become entrepreneur. Yes, it's difficult, but it's very make who you are. So it's to start early the entrepreneurship, to have the entrepreneurship mindset. It's not easy, but it's paying off.
It's a good point. I mean, it's a tough one, because I have to say I'm very happy and proud of mon cheminement, what I've achieved and what I experienced in my career. I'm the luckiest guy in the biz. I really, truly believe that, and I really cherished every chapter. So there's nothing certainly not a regret kind of answer. But if you're asking me what nudge would I say to a 20-year-old Eric Major, certainly as you get up the ranks, you got to accept that not everyone is going to like the decisions you make, which is a little bit different when you begin as a salesperson. You're engaging, you're embracing, you're bringing things together, and you could be Mr. Nice Guy. When you get up to the top, there's going to be a few people along the way who are not going to be happy with the decisions you make. And just telling the 20-year-old Eric, that's okay.
That's it for today, folks, but we'll be back soon with another episode of the Mobility Standard. Now, this podcast is open to the public, so there's a limit to the names we can name and the rumors we can discuss openly. But one place where I can promise you that won't be the case is during IMI Connect in Saigon next month, where industry leaders are gathering behind closed doors for private and confidential discussions on the issues that matter to the industry. Google IMI Connect Saigon right now, check it out, and let us know if you want to join. I wish you all a great week, and thank you